The champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered across the marble floor. A gasp rippled through the guests, sharp as broken crystal. My sister stood on the staircase in her glittering gown, smiling like a queen at her coronation. And at her side, our parents clapping with pride, as if nothing had just been stolen from me. They had announced it so casually, like a toast. "We used your wedding fund, darling, but look, your sister has her dream home now." The room roared with applause. I felt the blood drain from my face. My wedding, my future, was gone, siphoned into her keys and mortgage papers. And the worst part? They expected me to smile. My father's smug grin cut through the crowd. My mother's hand squeezed my arm, nails digging in. "Don't make a scene," she hissed. "Family comes first." I swallowed the rage, the humiliation, the betrayal. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't born into wealth, but I was born into expectation. My family prized appearances above everything: how we dressed, what we drove, where we lived. At reunions, money wasn't discussed, but it was flaunted. Gold watches flashed like weapons, luxury handbags paraded like trophies, and those who had less were quietly ridiculed. I learned early to work hard. I didn't have shortcuts, inheritances, or handouts. What I had was discipline. While my cousins partied, I worked double shifts. While my sister coasted on my parents' support, I was building something brick by brick. My career wasn't glamorous at first, but it was steady. Every paycheck went into savings, investments, and, more importantly, a vision for the future. Yet in my family's eyes, I was invisible. My achievements didn't matter because they weren't flashy. My sister got a new car for graduating. I bought mine secondhand after years of saving. She was applauded. I was pitied. That favoritism had been a pattern since childhood. She cried, she got candy. I worked, I got silence. And the truth was, I didn't complain. I thought my time would come, that quiet perseverance would one day speak louder than their shallow judgments. But favoritism doesn't fade. It calcifies. The family meetings were the worst. My uncles and aunts gathered like royalty, each eager to gossip about who bought the latest property, who was vacationing in Europe, whose child got admitted to an elite school. Those meetings weren't about bonding, they were battlegrounds, and anyone without armor of wealth was fair game. I usually kept my head down. I focused on sipping my tea, on watching the patterns in the tablecloth instead of their sneers. But no matter how small I tried to make myself, their comments always found me. "Still renting? Still driving that old thing?" Don't worry, some people just aren't meant to shine. The words stung, but I trained myself to smile politely, to let them believe they'd won, because inside, I was building something greater than they could imagine. There was one thing I carried with me that kept me anchored: a leather-bound notebook. It wasn't expensive, but it was priceless to me. In its pages, I had scribbled every business plan, every investment calculation, every dream. To the family, it would have looked like meaningless scratches. To me, it was a blueprint for freedom. That notebook became my symbolic object. Proof of my patience. Proof of my vision. Proof that even if they dismissed me today, tomorrow would look very different. But before that tomorrow could arrive, the first real sting came. It was during one particularly loud meeting. My sister had just announced that our parents were helping her buy a new condo. Applause filled the room, my uncles slapping her on the back, my aunts cooing about how lucky she was. Then someone asked about me, "And what about him?" Still struggling? The room burst into laughter. My sister leaned forward, her voice sweet as poison. "Struggling is an understatement. He's practically broke. I don't even know how he affords gas for that car of his." The laughter turned cruel. Forks paused mid-air as eyes darted toward me, waiting for me to crack. I could feel the heat crawl up my neck, the pressure behind my eyes. I gripped the notebook tighter under the table, my knuckles whitening. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just pettiness. It was humiliation, deliberate and sharpened. And it was only the beginning. Cliffhanger/foreshadowing. I thought that was the worst of it. But soon, I'd realized their cruelty had no limits, and mine had no intention of staying silent forever. The weeks after that meeting were heavier than I expected. I told myself their words didn't matter, that laughter and whispers couldn't touch me. But late at night, when the city quieted and my apartment walls seemed to close in, Their voices replayed in my head like a broken record. Practically broke. Not meant to shine. Poor thing. I'd wake at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, my chest tight as if someone sat on it. Sleep became elusive, and even when I drifted off, my dreams were jagged, scenes of family faces twisting with ridicule, of me trying to speak and no words coming out. The stress seeped into everything. Food lost its taste. My shoulders ached constantly from tension, and no matter how hard I worked, my victories felt hollow, as if they didn't count because no one in that family cared. That's when the harassment escalated. It wasn't just comments at the dinner table anymore. It spilled into group chats, into sly remarks from relatives on social media. One cousin posted a photo of his new car with the caption, "Upgrade goals, not hand-me-downs." Another joked, "At least some of us don't show up at family events smelling like engine oil." It was coordinated, a smear campaign dressed as banter. And worst of all, my parents never stopped it. In fact, sometimes they joined in. My father chuckled at the jokes. My mother shook her head and muttered, "If only you were more like your sister." That sentence cut deeper than any public insult. I withdrew, stopped answering calls, skipped a few gatherings. But avoidance only gave them more fuel. Soon, whispers reached me from mutual acquaintances, rumors that I was drowning in debt, that I'd been rejected from jobs, that I couldn't even pay rent without help. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter to them. The narrative was set. I was the struggling one, the family embarrassment. And yet, through the fog of despair, a spark appeared. It happened at work. I had just finished a long day, exhausted, my tie loose around my neck, when a colleague I barely knew lingered by my desk. Her name was Layla. "You okay?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." But she tilted her head, unconvinced. "You've been tired for weeks. You don't laugh at lunch anymore. You look heavy, like you're carrying something." The words hit me harder than any insult, not because they were cruel, but because they were kind. It had been so long since anyone actually noticed me beyond a punchline. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Family stuff." Her eyes softened. "Sometimes, the people meant to lift us up are the ones who weigh us down." I stared at her, stunned. It was as if she'd read the pages of my private notebook without ever opening it. She smiled, not prying further. "If you ever need to talk, I'll listen." No judgment. That night, for the first time in months, I felt the knot in my chest loosen slightly. Her words echoed as I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering outside my window. Sometimes the people meant to lift us up are the ones who weigh us down. She was right. My family had mistaken my silence for weakness. They thought their cruelty had buried me. But Layla's reminder, that I wasn't entirely alone, planted something inside me. It wasn't anger, it wasn't revenge, it was resolve. The next family meeting came sooner than expected. This time, my parents insisted I attend. "It'll look bad if you keep skipping," my mother warned. Her tone wasn't concern, it was command. Reluctantly, I went. The dining hall was the same as always. Chandeliers glowing like interrogation lamps, polished wood gleaming, plates of food untouched until the hierarchy of pride had been established. But the moment I stepped in, I sensed something different. Their smiles were too sharp. Their laughter, too rehearsed. I was the evening's entertainment. It started with a cousin reading aloud from his phone. "Did you all see this?" Someone posted about how certain people can't even qualify for a mortgage. How sad his eyes flicked straight to me. The room erupted in laughter. Then an uncle chimed in. "Well, it's not his fault. Not everyone is meant to succeed. At least his sister will carry the family name with dignity." My sister leaned back in her chair, her lips curling. "Exactly. We can't all be winners. Some of us were born to support, others to lead support. That's what they saw me as. A background character in their story." The humiliation was suffocating, but then my father raised his hand. The room fell quiet. He cleared his throat. "Actually, we've been discussing something important." His voice was heavy with false gravitas. "We believe it's time to consider family responsibilities more seriously." A murmur rippled around the table. "What do you mean?" someone asked. My father's eyes locked onto mine. He should contribute more. If he can't succeed alone, he should at least help build what his sister has started. After all, she's the one representing us. It hit me like a thunderclap. He wasn't just humiliating me anymore. He was demanding my resources, my work, my savings, my future, for her benefit. For a moment, hopelessness surged through me. I saw their plan clearly. Strip me of what little I had, tether me to my sister's shadow, and finally erase any chance of independence. And in that silence, I felt the room waiting for me to bow, to nod, to give them the satisfaction of my surrender. But something inside me shifted. I straightened my back, my hand slipping under the table to rest on my leather-bound notebook. That notebook wasn't just paper. It was proof of years of planning, of quiet victories they had never seen, investments they didn't know about, businesses they assumed I could never manage. I lifted my gaze slowly, meeting my father's stare with calm steel. "I understand," I said evenly. "But you should be careful assuming what I have, or don't have." A ripple of confusion spread across the table. My sister's smile faltered, just slightly. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in their eyes. Because the truth was, I wasn't poor. Far from it. My long nights, my sacrifices, my quiet work, they had borne fruit. I owned more than they guessed. I had investments, property, even partnerships they couldn't dream of. And soon, they would see. But revealing it now would waste the moment. No. This revelation needed the perfect stage. I tucked the notebook closer, my lips curving into the faintest smile. They thought they still had control. My voice echoed in my head, sharp and certain. They didn't. Cliffhanger/foreshadowing. That night, they believed they'd cornered me. What they didn't realize was that I'd already built an empire in silence, and the day they discovered it would shake them to their core. After that meeting, the whispers sharpened into weapons. If before I was the butt of jokes, now I was the target of a campaign. Rumors circulated faster than wildfire. I heard from colleagues, from neighbors, even from strangers online. My cousins had started posting thinly veiled insults. Some people pretend to be hardworking, but if you look closely, there's nothing to show for it. Others joined in with memes mocking dreamers who never achieve. It was clear. The family had turned my silence into a brand. In their story, I was the failure. My sister was the star. And my parents? They were the noble benefactors who had sacrificed for the child who deserved it most. It was a lie, but lies spread quickly when they benefit the powerful. At first, it stung. My chest tightened whenever I saw another post, another smirk. But slowly, the sting hardened into something else. Clarity. If they wanted war, they would get it. But not the kind they expected. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue online. I didn't confront anyone in rage. Instead, I became meticulous. I documented everything. Screenshots of posts, notes of conversations, even financial statements my parents had conveniently ignored. Every jab, every insult, every attempt to smear me became evidence. And while they wasted energy ridiculing me, I was building. The leather-bound notebook now sat open on my desk every night. Its pages were fuller than ever. Lists of assets, timelines of investments, records of businesses that bore my name in places they'd never looked. My savings had grown into something substantial, not because of luck, but because of years of sacrifice they had mocked. I started preparing with precision. Meetings with accountants, discussions with lawyers, calls with partners, all quiet, all unseen. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing they mocked, my silence, was what gave me power. Layla noticed too. "You look different," she said one evening as we walked out of work. "Different how?" I asked. "Calmer, sharper, like someone who's already won a battle no one else knows about." I almost laughed. She wasn't wrong. Her support was subtle, but steady. She reminded me to eat when I buried myself in plans, to breathe when the weight threatened to crush me. In her presence, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone preparing for victory. Meanwhile, the family only grew bolder. At the next gathering, my sister flaunted her new jewelry, her new condo keys dangling like trophies. "Unlike some people," she said sweetly, "I don't just dream, I achieve." The room erupted with applause. I smiled faintly, sipping my tea, knowing what was coming. Because the symbolic object, the notebook, was no longer just paper. It was a weapon. Proof of everything I had built while they laughed. Proof that their empire of favoritism was hollow. The day of reckoning was closer than they realized. One night, as I stood on my balcony overlooking the city lights, I whispered to myself, "They think they've written my story. But soon I'll turn the page, and when I do, no one will stop me." The wind carried the words into the night, as if sealing the promise. Cliffhanger/foreshadowing. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The invitation came casually, an offhand remark from my mother over the phone. "We're having another family dinner next weekend. Everyone will be there. Don't embarrass yourself this time, The words were sweet on the surface, but carried poison underneath. Don't embarrass yourself? I almost laughed. They had no idea. For a week, I prepared. Not with anger, not with frantic energy, but with a chilling calm. The notebook was tucked neatly into a black leather briefcase. Contracts, deeds, receipts, all filed in order. My silent army waited on paper, stronger than any insult. The night arrived. The dining room was as grand as ever, chandeliers glowing, polished wood shining under warm light. My relatives gathered like vultures in silk and gold. My sister strutted in late, jangling her keys like wind chimes, her designer bag clutched like a crown. My parents beamed at her, pride dripping from every glance. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, invisible again, or so they thought. The meal began, and with it, the performance. My uncles joked loudly about late bloomers. My cousins smirked when I reached for bread. My sister cleared her throat dramatically before raising her glass. "I just want to thank Mom and Dad," she said sweetly, "for believing in me. Not everyone has the courage to support their child's dreams. Some of us," she glanced at me, "just take and take while others build." Laughter rippled around the table. My chest tightened, but not from shame, from anticipation, because this was the moment. I placed my glass down carefully, letting the sound cut through the room. Slowly, I rose to my feet. "Interesting speech," I said, my voice steady. "But if we're sharing thanks, maybe it's time I shared mine." The room stilled. Every eye turned to me. I opened the briefcase and pulled out the notebook, placing it on the table with a soft thud. "For years," I began, "you've all mocked me, called me a failure, a dreamer, a nobody, and I let you, because I was building something you couldn't see." I flipped the pages open, revealing contracts, bank statements, deeds stamped with official seals. Gasps rose around the table. "These," I continued, "are the businesses I've built. The properties I own. The investments that have quietly multiplied while you laughed." I slid a document across the table toward my father. "That fishing business you thought I lost? I bought it back, months ago, and now it runs under my name alone." Another paper, to my mother. "The land you claimed you couldn't afford for me? I purchased it. And unlike the condo you showered on my sister, this one is fully paid, no debts attached." I turned to my sister, her smile frozen. "And as for your condo, well, let's just say I know who really signed those loan papers. It wasn't just our parents, it was their retirement fund. Which means, technically, you don't own it. They do. And I have the proof." The silence was suffocating. Faces paled, forks lay abandoned. My sister's hand trembled as she clutched her glass. Finally, my father spoke, his voice cracking. You planned this?" I met his gaze coldly. "No, I survived this. You planned to break me. You planned to take everything I deserved and hand it to her. But I endured. And now, I'm not just surviving. I'm winning." I closed the notebook with a sharp snap. "For years, you wrote me off. Tonight, I write you off." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply gathered my things, tucked the notebook back into the briefcase, and turned toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. My sister stammered. My mother whispered frantically. My father shouted my name. But I didn't look back, because the reckoning had arrived, and I had delivered it. Cliffhanger ending for transition to final batch. They thought I was invisible. But that night, I became unforgettable. The night after the confrontation, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, unanswered texts, voicemails filled with half-shouted demands. I let them pile up, each one a reminder that for the first time in years, the balance had shifted. By morning, the news had spread. Family meetings were never private. Gossip flowed faster than blood. Relatives who once avoided me now sent carefully worded messages. "You never told us you were doing so well. We're proud of you." Hypocrisy wrapped in politeness. But the ones who mattered most, my parents and my sister, were silent. When I finally returned to the family home, days later, it wasn't to argue, it was to collect what was mine. The living room was dim, curtains drawn against the world outside. My father sat hunched in his chair, the pride that once lit his face drained to ash. My mother's hands twisted in her lap, her eyes red from sleepless nights. My sister stood near the window, her phone clutched tightly, as if waiting for a call that might save her. "You humiliated us," my father said hoarsely when I entered. "No," I replied quietly. "I told the truth. You humiliated yourselves." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. My sister tried to protest, but her voice cracked. For the first time, her arrogance faltered. Without the family's blind support, she was just another person facing consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I simply walked to the corner of the room where an old wooden chest sat, something I had nearly forgotten. Inside was a photo album, filled with pictures of birthdays, holidays, and simpler days before favoritism poisoned everything. I picked it up, brushing the dust away. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the only inheritance I care about. Memories of a family that once meant something. The rest, your money, your houses, your status, you can keep it." They stared at me in silence, unsure whether to feel relief or shame. Weeks passed. My sister's condo quietly slipped into foreclosure. Without my parents secretly covering her expenses, the weight of her debts crushed her. The relatives who once praised her success now whispered behind her back, the same way they used to whisper about me. My parents withdrew from social gatherings, their proud facade shattered. They weren't ruined financially, but they were ruined socially, stripped of the illusion of control they once wielded. As for me, I moved into the property I had purchased, a modest but beautiful house on a quiet hilltop. From my balcony, I could see the city skyline, not as a reminder of what I lacked, but of what I had built on my own. The symbolic notebook, the one that silenced the family, sat framed on my new office shelf. Not the papers themselves, but the leather cover, preserved as a reminder. Beside it, I placed the photo album I had rescued, now restored and clean. One represented the battles I had fought. The other, the hope that family could be more than betrayal. Sometimes at night, I thought of that first humiliation, the sneers, the mocking, the cruel pity. And then I thought of the sound of silence when I revealed the truth. The way their faces drained of color. The way the room shifted forever. It wasn't revenge that gave me peace. It was reclaiming my worth. Narrator's closing reflection. They thought they could define me with their laughter. They thought wealth was measured in cars, condos, and false status. But worth? Worth is built in silence, brick by brick, choice by choice, until one day it stands taller than the tallest tower of lies. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Have you ever been underestimated, mocked, or dismissed by the very people who should have supported you? Have you ever been made to feel small until the moment you rose above it? This was my story, but it isn't just mine. Families, workplaces, communities, they all have people who thrive on favoritism and power. But what they forget is that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means preparation. I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, your struggles, your victories, your turning points. Because when we speak, we remind others they aren't alone. Remember this: worth isn't something they give you, it's something you claim for yourself.